Everyone. This is Rachel Yellen with the Yes to Birth Experience. I am delighted today that we have a fabulous guest. We have Sally Fallon Morrell today, who is the president and founder of the Weston A. Price Foundation. And the Weston A. Price Foundation is a nonprofit nutrition education foundation that is dedicated to returning nutrient-dense food to our tables. Sally is also deeply involved and runs the Campaign for Real Milk. The Campaign for Real Milk is actually getting us clean raw milk from accessible sources from pasture-raised animals. Sally is an incredible resource for us as she has written the Nourishing Traditions cookbook with Mary Enig, and she's written the Nourishing Book of Baby and Child Care with Thomas Cowan, and Nourishing Broth with Kayla Daniel, and Nourishing Fats and Nourishing Diets. So Sally is an incredible wealth of information, and I am delighted, Sally, to welcome you here today.
Thank you, Rachel. Yes, seems like we've got a little corner on that word nourishing, doesn't it?
Totally. Yeah. Love that. I love that. Well, I also love how you can see I have a couple of your books right here, and I always love the artwork. I spend a lot of time looking, sitting with the book, and what the covers of these books evoke in me is really that feeling of taking us back to how it's supposed to be, and taking us back to Little House on the Prairie. And so I wanted to share with everybody in particular, since we're here to help people have a healthier and less painful and empowering and satisfying birth experience, I really want to direct people to two different websites, the westonaprice.org website and to the nourishingtraditions.com website. And these two websites are a wealth of information for anyone who wants to learn about traditional diets and how to eat well for your health, for your physical health, your mental health, your relational health even. But I wanted to talk specifically today about a lot of the content that's in this book, the Nourishing Traditions Book of Baby and Child Care. We have already had an opportunity to speak with Sandrine Perez from the Nourishing Our Children organization. And so many of our listeners already know what nutrient dense means, who was Weston A. Price. So since, Sally, you are the expert of the experts in this field, I wanted to go deep with you into some of the topics that are so important to our listeners, and to share that in this book that there are so many topics such as flu shots for pregnant women, Rh incompatibility, anemia in pregnancy, morning sickness, fetal screenings, ultrasounds, glucose tolerance testing, group B strep, gestational diabetes, swelling, preeclampsia, and even how to prepare your nipples for feeding. I love that. I love that with the lemon juice. That's just brilliant. Also, for our viewers today, that in that book, also Sally talks about newborn procedures and interventions. And this is such an incredible resource because it offers a perspective that might overlap in some ways with your regular care provider, but may also introduce you to some other topics that are extremely valuable for you to know that there may be another way. There may be another way to have optimal health. So Sally, one of the things that you talk about in your book is really, what I love is that you differentiate between conception, fetal development, pregnancy, postpartum, and then, sort of forever. And I wanted to know, just right off the bat, can you help our viewers understand what is a healthy baby? People talk about healthy baby. Oh, my baby was born and my baby was healthy. What is your perspective on what is a healthy baby?
Yes, it's a very good question because I think we don't really see many healthy babies these days. And a healthy baby is robust and strong from birth. A healthy baby has nice skin, regular bowel movements. A healthy baby meets his or her milestones on time. A healthy baby doesn't cry much. A healthy baby, a baby's crying all the time. That baby's saying, "I'm hungry," and the baby may not be needing to have actual food in its stomach, but the food it's getting is not nourishing enough. So a healthy baby is all of these things, and of course, our big emphasis is on nutrition. And we have had literally hundreds of babies, healthy babies born, wonderful, cheerful, smiling, strong, not crying babies born to moms who followed our guidelines. And these guidelines include preparing for pregnancy. So you eat these nutrient-dense foods before you get pregnant. So you're prepared when the body becomes pregnant. By that time, it's too late to prepare. So these nutrient-dense foods, I'm sure Sandrine has gone over this, include things like liver, cod liver oil, raw milk, lots and lots of butter, egg yolks, seafood, especially fish eggs if you can get them. So these were the foods that traditional cultures ate to prepare for pregnancy and continued during the pregnancy, and then during lactation. It's just as important when you're nursing to eat these foods. And then baby's first foods need to be the most nutrient-dense foods possible, aside from a nutrient-dense breast milk, and we recommend egg yolks and pureed liver, not squash and applesauce, but really nutrient-dense foods. And all of these other things that you're talking about, preeclampsia, anemia, all of these things will give way to the good diet. The good diet is just fundamental here.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So as you were talking about about babies crying, and when babies are crying, they're either hungry or they're not getting enough nutrients. What other signs would a person see in their own child if the child was not adequately nourished?
Well, something that's very common is anemia, and the child will be pale, also clinging, afraid. Some of the symptoms of anemia are similar to those of autism. The child is very much within himself or herself. And this is a very serious concern because prolonged anemia can lead to mental retardation. So you just do not want this to happen. So you want to make sure, of course, that the child is getting iron-rich foods, but you also need vitamin A to absorb that iron, and that's going to be in your animal fats, your butter and liver and so forth. So again, all of these foods that we're talking about, and most of them are kind of unfamiliar to Americans, but these are the really nutrient-dense foods that you need for this critical period. And at no other time in your life will your body be under such stress to perform, to make a healthy baby, to nourish the baby, to nourish yourself. It's just as important to nourish yourself during this period. And that's why you need to, stop all the empty foods, the junk foods, and really focus on foods that every morsel that you're eating is truly nourishing.
That is so vital. And I really like that you expressly said, that every morsel of food that you're eating. Can you help us understand? People cringe, at the idea of eating a raw egg yolk or eating a raw cheese or raw milk, or organ meats. Of course, people go, "Oh, organ meats! Liver, isn't liver where all the toxins are processed?" We gotta, So, can you explain why raw foods are so good for us?
So the egg yolk does not have to be raw. The eggs don't have to be raw. In fact, the egg whites should not be eaten raw. But we do insist on the raw dairy foods because dairy foods are very delicate. The proteins and enzymes in dairy foods are easily warped and distorted by heat, and then they don't work anymore. And so instead of having this really nutrient-dense foods that's easy to digest and all the nutrients are absorbed, once you've heated the milk, you've got a food that's really hard to digest and where the nutrients aren't easily absorbed, and it can be highly allergenic. So I always like to point out that breast milk, which we recognize as the ideal food for babies, breast milk is raw milk. And if you can't breastfeed for whatever reason, then you need to give your baby raw milk from another species. And the quality of your milk this is true for humans and all animals, the quality of the milk will depend on the quality of the diet.
Wow. I've heard so many, just recently, I heard somebody say that you could eat Cheetos in your whole pregnancy or, afterwards, and your baby would still get everything that they need. And I thought, well, how is that possible? I always understood that, our baby's brain and eyes are made from the fats that we eat during.
Yes, that's right.
And how would anybody say that it doesn't matter what you eat? I just don't understand that.
There's no vitamin A, there's no vitamin D, there's no vitamin K in Cheetos, there's no B12, there's no B6. And the fats, the oils used to fry the Cheetos in are the worst, absolutely the worst types of oils that you could take for your immune system, for the development of the baby. I mean, anybody saying that is, they'll have a lot to answer for because they're misleading women. And it's very hard for people to change their diets, but the time when women are most open to changing their diets is when they're contemplating having a baby or when they're pregnant. This is when they get it the most and are the most motivated to change their diet. And to come along and say to a young mother or prospective mother, you don't have to change anything in your diet, you can just eat all the garbage you've always eaten, that's a terrible thing to do.
Yeah. Why are organic foods, non-GMO foods, pasture-raised foods, wild caught, why is that so important?
Well, we want to avoid the GMO foods, okay, number one, because they are a real strain on the system, and they're raised with Roundup, which one thing Roundup does is it substitutes for glycine in the body. And
What
you
is
need
what is Roundup? I'm sorry.
Roundup is a chemical called glyphosate, and it will get in, and instead of the glycine, which is an amino acid that you need to have really strong tendons and joints, and pregnant women need a lot of glycine for the growth of the baby. We get glycine from bone broth, we get glycine from connective tissue, and the glyphosate, which is an all genetically modified food, will substitute for the glycine, and you're going to have trouble with your joints. The mom is the pregnant mother, joints and tendons, and the baby will not start out with the good quality structure of the joints and tendons. So that's what we shouldn't be eating. But let's see, what else we should be eating? Organic for sure. Pasture raised, butter, eggs, meat, milk. It's all going to be much more nutrient dense than these same foods from confinement cows. I think that's obvious. And so yes, this is an important time. All your life is important, but this is a particularly important time to focus on the quality of what you're eating.
So when I think about, people often say to me, because my life completely changed when I was quite ill, when I was 35, and then again when I was 38, and when I started implementing the principles of the Weston A. Price principles and the Nourishing Traditions principles, I had a dramatic shift in my health. And so I became much more interested in health and wellness. And I started to, go all organic. And then people say, oh, it doesn't matter, organic doesn't matter, or you can get natural meat. You don't have to spend the extra on the grass-fed meat. Why is it so important to have organic fruits, vegetables? And why is the grass-fed meat? What's the difference in the quality?
Well, as far as organic is concerned, what you're avoiding is a lot of pesticides, herbicides, a lot of chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily more nutrient dense. We all know that, but you are at least avoiding some of the worst chemicals, some of which are endocrine disruptors. And yeah, I mean, I think that's obvious. Now, for pasture raised versus confinement, when you put your animals outside on green grass and in the sunlight, the meat, milk, organ meats, whatever, butter, fat, is going to be much higher in these critical vitamins, vitamins A, D, and K, which are just fundamental for forming a healthy baby.
Mm. Okay. So really want our viewers to really take that in. And also, one of the things that I have heard and learned is that, besides the nutrient quality of the foods, that when we eat foods that have pesticides and particularly pesticides, that pesticides are designed to kill bugs, and so that
Yeah.
when we eat them, they actually kill bugs in our system, and many of which are good, healthy bugs that we need.
Yes. Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. So I'm really curious about your take on prenatal vitamins.
Oh, okay.
Everybody goes on and on about
Yeah.
how important they are, and there's something about it that I haven't been so sure about. So can you can you talk about that?
And that's when you get pregnant and you go to the doctor and you say, well, do I need to be doing anything special with my diet? They say, here, you take these prenatal vitamins, and that's supposed to cover all your bases. And there's a couple of problems here. First of all, if you haven't been careful about your diet before you're pregnant, that baby's going to start out, on the wrong foot, so to speak. And by the time you go see your doctor, you're probably 2 months pregnant. All the important developmental decisions have already been made in your baby's body. The die has already been cast. It's cast in the first few weeks, and if your body's not prepared and replete with nutrients, there's things that are going to be compromised. But secondly, I don't think these prenatals are a good way to get the nutrition that your body needs. For example, they have folic acid in them instead of folate. And we're now finding out that folic acid actually can almost cause a deficiency in folate, which is what you need. The vitamin A in these prenatals is not the true vitamin A. It tends to be carotenes, and your body has a very hard time converting these carotenes. We also know from studies that if you eat liver, that vitamin A is going to be much more appropriately utilized, whereas the vitamin A in the prenatals could actually contribute to birth defects. The vitamin D, okay, it's usually D3. There's 1,000 forms of vitamin D, not just D3, and you need to eat foods with vitamin D to get all those forms of vitamin D. And the minerals in the prenatals are often very difficult to absorb or are not absorbed at all. So they give a sense of false security, the prenatals, and the pregnant moms need to be getting these nutrients from food.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. How?
And by the way, I might add the prenatals almost all these vitamins are made in China,
Mm,
where there's very little quality control. You have absolutely no idea whether what they say is in them is actually in them.
right.
And they're made in the really horrible chemical processes that contain a lot of contaminants.
Oh, that's so vital for our listeners to understand. We just live in such a culture of being inundated with these whole belief systems about what we're supposed to do, and if and when you start to really think about it, it makes so much sense to do everything you can to get your nutrition from the best sources. And that's another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. When I called you the other day and your husband said, "Oh, she's out making cheese," just I was overwhelmed with delight. It's like, oh, okay, she's on her farm, in
Yeah.
the cow shed, or whatever she's doing making her cheese. And I wanted to hear about, how do people source these nutrient dense foods specifically? Like, I can understand where, of course you can get organic vegetables from your local farm, but where are they getting high quality liver that they can trust from a source they can trust, and raw milk and the fish eggs. Where do they get that?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it, because at the Weston A. Price Foundation, we pride ourselves in not only providing the information that people need, but also helping them find the foods, because it does no good to know what to eat if you can't find those foods. So we have a system of local chapters. We have about 500 chapters worldwide, about 400 in the United States, and there's bound to be a local chapter near you. You go to our website, westonaprice.org, click on Find a Local Chapter, and call your chapter or email your chapter. They're all listed with their contact information. And what the local chapters do is they keep a food list. They tell you where you can get raw milk where you live, where you can get good liver, grass-fed liver. Often they have meetings, support meetings too, for moms and everybody. And very often the chapter leaders organize food groups where you can, sorry, hope you can edit that out. Sure. Very often they organize the food groups where you can, one-stop shopping. You order online and you go pick up at somebody's garage, coming from Amish farmers or grass-based farmers. So our chapter leaders can help you find these foods.
Excellent, excellent. That's really helpful. I do remember when I came to WAF.
Yeah, WAF.
WAF. When I came to WAP, and there was so much, and this was in San Francisco, and there was incredible resources from how to make fermented foods. And there's a sauerkraut party, or there was meeting up at this farm in this location for a farm tour. And I was able, of course in California there's an incredible abundance, but I was able to, get, a share in a lamb, and, without the middleman, from the farm into my freezer. And it made me feel really good. It made me feel connected to my ancestors. And I wonder if you could say a couple of words about that in terms of our ancestors, and looking at the diet from the diet of your ancestors, and how that might be how shifting your diet to meet more of what your ancestors were eating might make a difference.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we teach. We need to go back to the way our ancestors ate. Now, if you're from, let's say you're from Slovenia, that's just your grandmother. But if you're from America, you may have to go back 4 or 5 generations to find people who were really eating properly. I will say this, that Americans before the Second World War had a very good diet. We were a dairy nation. They ate lots of butter, eggs, 3 or 4 times as much as we eat today. They had, everything was grass-fed naturally, and they ate organ meats. They didn't throw the organ meats away. In fact, most families had liver once a week because that's what the doctors told them to do. The liver was how they avoided anemia, but it also ensured that the moms would have healthy babies. They weren't probably thinking that along those lines, but it did. And the other thing that virtually all Americans got before the Second World War was cod liver oil, which was recognized as being important for having healthy babies. Not only did it protect them against measles and infections, but the advertisements for cod liver oil said, if you want a baby with a healthy, strong back and wide face and straight, even, strong teeth, take cod liver oil. And they were right. Cod liver oil really helps with this.
Yeah, I've seen and heard of people who've had massive changes in their experience of pregnancy from one pregnancy to another, as they have changed their diet and adopted the traditional foods diet.
Yes.
I want to know, you can answer this, or you personally, or you can just be general. So I'm curious, for somebody like me, not pregnant, in my 40s, or for somebody who might be, older than I am, what would a daily diet actually look like? So I want to
Yeah,
ask
good
for
question.
regular person, and then what about for the pregnant or postpartum person?
Okay, well, I'll just tell you how I eat. My husband and I
Or-
eat. And I'll just, let's say I'm 70, I'm still making cheese, and my husband's 92, he still drives a tractor. So we're doing pretty well. So for breakfast, we have pastured eggs and bacon. That's one type of breakfast we have. Or we have oatmeal that we've soaked overnight and that we eat with plenty of butter or cream. Uh, Lunch, we pretty, typically our breakfast is kind of low carb, except for that oatmeal breakfast, I guess. Then for lunch, this is when I like to eat superfoods. So I make pate, I have my liver or my raw cheese. Oh, and by the way, I always have a glass of raw milk for breakfast. And I have my fermented beet kvass, that's my little tonic, which is a very interesting recipe in nourishing traditions. So that's breakfast. Then lunch, typically we have soup for lunch. We make a big pot of soup with bone broth every month and freeze it in quart-sized jars. And so we typically have fruit for lunch, soup for lunch, and I like to have a superfood with lunch, like cheese or liver, something like that. And then for dinner, our dinners are pretty standard. We have meat or sometimes beef liver or calf's liver, or fish, seafood, and either a soup or salad, and 2 or 3 vegetables with lots and lots of butter on the vegetables, and potatoes or sweet potatoes or rice. And then my husband likes to have fruit for dessert. I'm usually too full, but and I can say that we pretty much put butter on everything. If we're eating a piece of sourdough bread, you want to see the teeth marks in your butter.
Yum.
The two of us, I would say the two of us go through a stick of butter a day, at
Yeah.
least. Mm-hmm.
And what is it specifically in the butter that is vital?
Butter is the healthiest fat on the planet. After all, it is the fat in nature that nourishes all growing infants. All. It's in all mammalian milk. There can't be anything bad about it. So butter from grass-fed cows will provide these 3 critical vitamins, A, D, and K. It also has the perfect balance of fatty acids. It has saturated fats, which are very important for you. It has the short-chain saturated fatty acids that we find in coconut oil that are very important for the immune system. It has a fat called arachidonic acid, which is critical for the digestion, for digestive tract, for having healthy skin, and it's critical for the brain. 11% of the brain is arachidonic acid, and the best source of arachidonic acid is butter. And there's other fatty acids as well. There's something called CLA, which is an anti-cancer. We call it the slim fat because it helps keep you lean and slim. There's just so many good things in butter. There's no way that a man can imitate it with
So
factory.
when people are talking about, they have lactose intolerance or inflammation, and they're on, like, for me, I'm on an autoimmune diet, and I've been told that I shouldn't have any dairy. So what do you think about that for people with lactose intolerance, or told that they shouldn't have dairy because it's an inflammatory because of the mucus production? What is that?
Well, there are some milk proteins left in butter. For most people, they are totally not a problem, but if they are, you can use ghee instead, which has all the milk proteins taken out.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So, and what about the diet? So I love hearing, I love, one of my favorite activities is hearing what people eat. So I thank you for sharing what you and your husband eat. And then I'm wondering, what is the difference? So with a pregnant or preconception, pregnant and postpartum mom, what else would they be having in their diet?
Well, I forgot to mention that I do take cod liver oil every morning, and so does my husband. And that is absolutely paramount for the pregnant woman. I think the pregnant women need more egg yolks than normal, more butter. I also think that seafood is very important for the pregnant woman, and especially things like fish eggs. I sometimes call our diet the caviar and pate diet. Those are two really nutrient-dense foods. So, like, see if you could get some salmon roe or something like that. That would be good. But the cod liver oil covers, what you get from weird foods like fish eggs. Shellfish are excellent. Shrimp, oysters, mussels, all those things.
Okay, awesome. Uh, I wonder, so one of the things I want our listeners to really kind of get the impact of what you're talking about. So I just wanted to give a couple of examples of like my friend Katie, she had the worst eczema I have ever seen. I mean, it's cracked hands, horrible. She'd have to wear gloves and sleep with gloves, and she had bleeding, cracked hands. And she switched her diet to she switched her diet to a Nourishing Traditions diet, and took out a few things. Took out a few of the particularly gluten foods,
Mm-hmm.
and healed. And
That's
my
wonderful.
yeah, and a client that I had, Rebecca, she came to see me for my depth hypnosis therapy with severe anxiety. And normally in therapy, you start looking about your childhood issues.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I said to her, I said, "Can you just tell me what you ate the last 3 days?" And she told me what she ate, for which I had to hold back my how are you standing here? Um, but I said to her, I said, "Why don't we just start by switching your diet, your breakfast, just your breakfast? Let's just do
Yeah.
that." And when I saw her the next week, she said that she had not had any panic attacks and that her anxiety was down by 50%.
Yes, a good breakfast really goes a long way. I've learned myself, I just have to have fat at every meal. And when I do, I don't get that letdown in the afternoon. That's when you feel anxious, when your blood sugar goes too low.
Absolutely.
I've also found that vitamin A is really critical for any kind of stress. And if I'm under a lot of stress, like I have a deadline, a lot of work to do, I do take more cod liver oil. And I find that it helps me kind of sail through. It doesn't take the workload away, but it takes my anxiety about it away.
Sure. Right. The heightened state of I have to get this done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also, I had another woman that I used to work with, Jenny, who had severe psoriasis. I mean, so it was just terrible, and severe psoriasis, and then she had cancer. And I wonder if you want to say anything to our listeners about there's a lot of conflict. That people talk about that you shouldn't be having red meat when you have cancer, that this diet for cancer that is seemingly very, very plant-based. Do you have any wisdom or want to share anything about that argument that takes place?
Yeah. Actually, the latest thinking on diets for cancer patients is the ketogenic diet, which is very high in animal fat, a little bit of protein. I do agree that cancer patients should not have a lot of protein. And the American diet, this may sound shocking to you coming from me, but I feel that the American diet often is too high in protein,
Mm-hmm.
without all the fats that you're supposed to have with the protein. 10 to 15% of calories as protein is the maximum. A lot of people are eating tons of red or lean meat, skinless chicken breasts, egg whites, skim milk, protein powders, and they're getting way too much protein. And I don't think this is good for anybody, especially for the cancer patient. So I think for the cancer patient, first of all, raw milk is a wonderful food for the cancer patient. And it's a high fat food, low in protein, moderate carbs. I mean, it's great nutrient profile. And meats, yes, meats are fine. You need those red meats. They're very nourishing, but they should be consumed with the fat. With the fat on the meat, or like the French do. The French put butter on their steaks. I think it's a great idea.
Oh, it's delicious.
Yes.
That's absolutely delicious. Now this is my I mean, it's funny because my skin is like glows now because of the how much fat I eat, and
Yeah.
whereas I used to feel like I was more wrinkly, and now I'm plumper, like in a good way.
Yes.
Plumper,
Yeah.
which I love. So Sally, I of course could spend hours talking with you, but we're gonna wind down, and I wanted to share with our viewers that you can learn a lot more about the Weston A. Price Foundation and Nourishing Traditions if you go to the Weston. It's WESTON, the letter A PRICE.org. If you go to that website, you'll see a window will pop up and it'll say, learn the basics of wise tradition diets in 7 easy lessons. I highly recommend that just to get familiar. So go check that out. That's free to get that 7 lessons to learn about the basics of the wise traditions diet. And then if you go to the nourishingtraditions.com blog, I could spend hours in there learning about health and wellness and some of the common misconceptions that we are literally digesting from these media sources that really don't have anything to back it up. So
Yeah, I did a series, you have to go back a few months, but I did a series called Bringing Up Baby, and just some of the misconceptions about feeding babies and what they really need. And so, yeah.
Great.
Good one to look at.
Such a valuable resource. So Sally, I like to end with just asking about the whole purpose of the Yes to Birth experience is so that the practitioners, the birth practitioners who are watching, the pregnant women, the partners, anybody who's involved with pregnancy or birth has more knowledge about what makes for the most the most nutrient dense baby.
And the most nutrient dense birth, because these foods are what you need to prepare yourself for the birth. I mean, when you're giving birth, the most incredible outpouring of hormones occurs to widen the pelvis. Your pelvis gets wider. I mean, think of all the hormones you need to do that. You've got contractions, you've got all sorts of things happening at once. And it's a beautiful symphony of hormones and lots of things going on. And all of that requires good nutrition. And so many people have told us how easy their births have been and what a wonderful experience it was who have been on our diet. And then out comes this gorgeous baby, this absolutely beautiful baby with a broad face and looking so healthy just the moment it's born.
Totally. I remember being at a birth from back when I was a doula, where a woman gave birth and the baby looked kind of small, and they put the baby on the scale and the baby weighed 8.5 pounds, and they thought it was like a 6-pound baby. And it was so obvious that this was like a nutrient dense baby, that bones were solid and the structure of this child, it looked small, but it was so heavy. And
one of my boys was like that. He weighed in at over 9 pounds, and the nurse said, boy, he looks like a 7-pound baby to me. I would never have guessed he was 9 pounds.
Yes.
And he ended up being a really big guy, a football player, very heavy, dense bones. So that bone structure starts in the womb. And drinking raw milk and taking your cod liver oil, all these things ensures those beautiful nutrient dense bones, the beautiful bone structure.
Right. And I also want to point to the placenta and how this nutrient dense preconception and pregnancy creates a healthier, more robust placenta. I remember one of my midwife friends was working with a woman who was maybe 26 years old and was eating fast food regularly. And when the placenta was birthed, it was covered in calcifications to the point where the midwife was holding it and said it was sharp in my hand, these hardened spots.
By the way, one thing that can do that is vitamin D. Dr. Price wrote about this. When they gave vitamin D separately to the pregnant moms, the placentas came out calcified. This is another reason not to take the prenatal vitamins, because just this one form of vitamin D. And vitamin D needs to be balanced with A and K and all the other nutrients. You need to get it from food. But that calcified placenta is a very good example of what happens when people are taking vitamin D. And of course, all the doctors are telling the pregnant women to take vitamin D.
Yeah. Do you have resources on either one of the websites, the westonaprice.org or Wise or the Nourishing Traditions website, for nutritional therapists that can work individually with women? You know, because like I said, like one person has an autoimmune disease and one person has celiac, or one person has dairy sensitivities or whatever. Do you have resources for that?
What we say there, we don't keep a master list, but we do suggest you call your local chapter. Usually they'll know who the good practitioners are. And on the Weston A. Price Foundation website, westonaprice.org, there's a tab called Health Topics. You click on Health Topics, and then there's a tab called, or a thing you can click called Children's Health. And it's all about pregnancy and children and so forth. On my own website, nourishingtraditions.com, there is a tab that says resources, and what I have there are all my PowerPoint presentations with commentary. So and I've just updated them, so those would be a very good resource for newcomers.
Incredible. I want to just reiterate that we are here today with Sally Fallon Morrell. And Sally, you have provided us with so much valuable information, and I feel like we have just barely, touched this little tiny tip of where we could go. And I want to make sure that our viewers understand the importance of your work and the dedication that you have put into making sure that we understand about what we need in order to thrive, because that's really what we're talking about. So
Right.
is there anything, any message, if you could look into the eyes, if you could look into the eyes of, women who are like, I want to get pregnant soon, or I'm pregnant right now, to reassure them, to inspire them further, more than you've already done? Is there
I think the message would be, it's really worth it. It's really worth it to put this effort into changing your diet, because the babies that are born to our moms who did this, they're fantastic babies. They're a gift to the families. They're a gift to the planet. And nobody can do this for your baby but you. I often say the future of our country, the future of the planet, rests on the shoulders of young women. You are the only ones who can change things right now. And we are in a very serious situation. So we need to support women of childbearing years in every possible way that we can. And first and foremost, with the right, accurate information.
Yes. Thank you, Sally.
Thanks for having me.
For your presence. It's been a total delight. Wishing you all the best. Thanks again. And thank you all for being here on the Yes to Birth experience. And we'll see you again soon. Bye. I am so happy that you're a part of the Yes to Birth movement. Please visit yestobirth.com to learn more about my pregnancy, birth, and beyond audio relaxation program, my childbirth education and techniques programs, and my private counseling and coaching. Yes to Birth. I'm Rachel Yellen. Bye.